What did you do to that chicken?
I cooked it.
No, you murdered it. Wait, you can cook?
I learned.
You told me you couldn't cook.
I couldn't before I met you.
There was a fire alarm. There was smoke pouring out from under apartment 4B. And there was a woman standing in the hallway in her socks, arms crossed, staring at the most gorgeous man she had ever seen in her life, holding a smoking frying pan like it was a completely normal Tuesday. His name was Park Ji-hoon, 30 years old, a software engineer who had just moved from Korea to Houston, Texas. Lean, messy black hair, tattoos on his forearm that made him look like trouble. He was not trouble. He was a disaster. Just in the kitchen. Because here's the thing about Ji-hoon. He could build software that solved problems nobody else could touch. He could debug a system at 2 a.m. without blinking. But hand that same man a raw chicken breast and a stove, and you had officially entered a crime scene. And right next door, in the apartment that always smelled like heaven, like fried chicken and peach cobbler and spices he couldn't name, lived a woman who was about to change his entire life without even trying. Her name was Danielle Brooks, 28. A food photographer with a laugh that filled a hallway and a tongue sharp enough to make a grown man forget how to speak. She didn't move in to save him. She just wanted to know why her hot, mysterious neighbor kept setting off the smoke detector like clockwork. What she didn't expect was to fall for him one burnt chicken breast at a time. What he didn't expect was that learning to hold a knife correctly would end with her hand over his, both of them frozen, neither one breathing. Because this isn't just a story about a man who can't cook. It's about a man who has spent his whole adult life needing no one. Clean apartment, empty walls, no photos, no plants, no noise. Slowly discovering that the fullest room in his life was the one right next door. It's about the night his own mother, 7,000 miles away in Korea, took one look at a photo of his fried rice and asked the one question he never saw coming. Did Danielle cook it? He never told her about Danielle. So how did she know? It's about the moment Danielle finds out the truth, that the man who swore he couldn't cook had secretly been cooking flawless Korean dishes behind her back the entire time. And when she confronts him, when she says, "You lied to me," his answer is the line that changes everything between them. And it all builds to one final night months later, when Danielle walks back into an apartment she barely recognizes. Warm, alive, full of plants and photographs and a table set for two. And hears him say the one sentence that will absolutely wreck you. Stay with me till the end. This one is soft, funny, a little jealous, a lot romantic. And there is no villain, no mafia, no evil family waiting to ruin it. Just two people, one burnt pan. And a love that started with smoke and ended with home. Let's get into it. And before we dive in, I need to know two things from you. Comment below with the one dish you would teach Ji-hoon to cook first if he moved in next door to you. And then tell me what city or country you're watching this from tonight. I want to see just how far this love story traveled before it's over. Houston in August was the kind of heat that sat on your chest the second you stepped outside, thick and wet, like the whole city was breathing on you. Park Ji-hoon had been living in the Magnolia Grove apartment complex for exactly 6 weeks, and in that time he had learned 3 things about Texas. The air conditioning never truly won the fight against the heat, the highways were built by someone who hated joy, and he was, without question, the worst cook in the state of Texas. He hadn't planned on any of that last part being a problem. Back in Seoul, food had simply appeared. His mother cooked breakfast before he woke up and dinner before he got home from the office, and on the rare nights he stayed late, there was always a container in the fridge with a sticky note on it. "Eat this, don't forget," in her small, sharp handwriting. He never thought about where food came from. It was just there, the way the sun was just there, the way his mother's voice calling him down for dinner was just there. Then he took a job with a tech company in Houston, packed 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, and discovered that 30-year-old adult men who can architect a distributed database system from scratch can also, apparently, forget that oil catches fire if you leave it on high heat for 4 minutes while checking your phone. His apartment, 4B, top floor, corner unit, was clean in the particular way that empty things are clean. No photographs on the walls. No plants on the windowsill. A couch that had never been sat on by more than one person at a time. A refrigerator that contained hot sauce, 3 energy drinks, and a lonely block of cheese he wasn't sure was still good. He was, by every visible measure, successful. Good job. Good apartment. Good bones. Cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. Dark eyes that looked serious even when he wasn't being serious. Tattoos curling along his forearm that made strangers assume things about him that weren't remotely true. Women in the elevator sometimes went quiet when he stepped in. Ji-hoon never noticed. He was usually thinking about a bug in his code or wondering if he had enough instant noodles to get through the week. He did not have enough instant noodles to get through the week. That was, in fact, the entire reason for what happened on a Tuesday evening in late August, the night his life quietly, invisibly began to change. He had decided, foolishly, bravely, to cook chicken. Not order it. Not microwave it. Cook it from a raw, sad-looking chicken breast he'd bought at the grocery store because the label said easy, and he had believed it. The way you believe a stranger who tells you a shortcut will save you time. He turned the heat up high because high heat felt efficient. He put the chicken in the pan without really checking if the oil was ready, because checking felt like a skill he didn't have yet. Then he went to answer a work email because surely, chicken did not need to be watched that closely. Chicken, it turns out, needed to be watched that closely. There was a loud, violent pop from the kitchen. Then another. Ji-hoon looked up from his laptop just in time to see a small curl of black smoke drift past the doorway. Unhurried, almost polite, like it had all the time in the world. "Oh no," he said out loud to no one. He walked into the kitchen exactly the way a man walks toward a problem he already suspects is unfixable. Calm face, racing heart. The pan was doing something that could generously be described as cooking and more accurately described as cremation. Smoke rose in a thick, confident column straight toward the ceiling. Straight toward the smoke detector. The alarm went off like the building itself was screaming. Next door in apartment 4C, Danielle Brooks had just finished editing a photograph of a bowl of shrimp étouffée. The light hitting the rice exactly right, steam still curling off the top even in the still frame, because she had learned exactly the right angle and exposure to make food look like a memory you hadn't had yet. When the fire alarm cut through the wall like it was made of tissue paper, she sat up straight. What in there? She was out her front door in her socks before she'd even fully processed leaving. In the hallway, gray smoke was leaking out from under 4B's door in slow, deliberate wisps, and for one full second Danielle's stomach dropped, because smoke under a door at 11 p.m. was not a small thing. She banged on the door with the flat of her hand. Hey, is everything okay in there?" The door opened, and there he was, smoke rolling out behind him in a soft, apocalyptic haze, and standing directly in the middle of it, utterly unbothered, was the most beautiful man Danielle had personally ever seen in her 28 years on this earth. Lean. Dark hair falling messily over his forehead like he'd just woken up from a nap in a shampoo commercial. A dish towel draped over one shoulder like he was a chef instead of, apparently, an arsonist. He looked at her the way you'd look at someone interrupting a perfectly normal Tuesday. "Are you cooking?" Danielle asked because it seemed important to confirm this was intentional and not, say, an electrical fire. "Yes," Ji-hoon said. "What were you cooking?" He paused like the question required real consideration. "Chicken." Danielle leaned past him and looked into the kitchen, where a pan sat on the stove containing something that no longer resembled chicken or food, or anything that had once been alive and was now, tragically, still slightly on fire around the edges. She looked at the pan, then back at him. "That chicken," she said slowly, "has seen things." He blinked. "I don't understand." Which, of course, made it funnier. She started laughing, really laughing, the kind that bent her forward a little and made her have to grab the doorframe. And Ji-hoon stood there in his own smoke-filled apartment, mildly confused, faintly charmed, and completely unaware that he had just met the woman who was going to take his entire life apart and put it back together, one ruined dinner at a time. His name was Park Ji-hoon. Hers was Danielle Brooks. They exchanged names in the hallway while the smoke alarm finally quieted down and his apartment slowly aired out, propped open with a shoe because he didn't own a doorstop. "You're lucky it was just chicken," Danielle said, arms crossed, still faintly smiling. "I thought this building was going up. I am sorry for the noise." "I'm not mad about the noise. I'm mad you almost took me out with you. I was mid-edit." She peered past him again, unable to help herself. "Do you cook often?" "No," Ji-hoon admitted. "Could have fooled me." "I can make ramen," he said, with the quiet dignity of a man offering his one credential. Something flickered in Danielle's eyes, the specific delight of someone who senses a joke arriving and wants to walk it out slowly. "From scratch?" He looked at her, genuinely confused by the question, like she'd asked if he built the pan himself. "No. From the package." Danielle laughed again, louder this time, and it echoed pleasantly down the hallway, and Ji-hoon felt something strange and unfamiliar happen in his chest, a small, warm confusion, like standing in a patch of sun without knowing where it came from. "So let me get this straight," she said, holding up one finger. "You almost burned the building down, making chicken, which you clearly do not know how to make. And your backup plan, your safety net, is instant noodles." "Yes. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week, and I photograph food for a living, so I hear a lot of sad food stories." "You take pictures of food?" "I'm a food photographer. And content creator." She said it easily, like it was a normal thing to be, which, in her world, it was. "That's actually why my apartment always smells like something good. I cook, then I shoot it, then I usually eat it cold because I spent 45 minutes trying to get the steam right." Ji-hoon considered this information with the seriousness of a man filing away a critical system spec. "That is why it smells so good in the hallway. You've noticed my cooking." "Every night," he said, entirely without flirtation, entirely without guile, simply stating a fact the way he'd state a bug report. "I think about what you are making. Sometimes I am hungry because of you." Danielle's eyebrows went up. She hadn't expected that particular sentence to land the way it did. Soft and honest and just slightly too direct, the way people are direct when they don't yet know the social cost of directness in a new country, a new language, a new life. "Well," she said, recovering, "next time before you try to defeat a chicken breast in single combat, knock on my door instead. You would help me." "I didn't say that." She was already turning to go, hiding a smile she didn't fully understand herself. "I said knock. What happens after that depends on how funny you are." He knocked 3 days later. Not for cooking help. He told himself it was to return the small fire extinguisher she'd insisted on lending him. For emergencies, which, given your track record, will be soon. But really it was because he had thought about her at least once every day since the smoke alarm, and he didn't know what to do with that fact except find a reason to see her again. Danielle opened the door in an apron dusted with flour, her hair wrapped in a scarf, a wooden spoon in one hand like a scepter. "Oh good," she said. "You're alive. I was worried the noodles finally got you." "I am alive," Ji-hoon confirmed. "You want to come in, or are you just going to stand in my doorway being handsome and useless?" He hadn't been called handsome to his face by a stranger before. Not directly, not so casually, like it was simply an observed fact alongside the weather. He didn't know what to do with his hands. "I can come in." Her kitchen was nothing like his. Herbs in little jars along the windowsill. A cast iron pan that looked older than both of them combined. Seasoned black and shining. A radio playing low, something with horns in it. The smell, the same smell that had been driving him quietly insane through the wall for 6 weeks, was fried chicken, and something sweet baking underneath it that he'd later learn was peach cobbler. "I'm making dinner for myself," Danielle said. "You're welcome to stay on one condition." "What condition?" "You tell me the truth about your cooking situation. All of it. No editing for pride." Ji-hoon sat at her small kitchen table, and for the first time since arriving in Houston, told someone the truth about his life. His mother's cooking back home, the fact that he genuinely could not remember the last time he'd made a meal that didn't come from a package or a delivery app, the fact that his refrigerator currently contained one suspicious block of cheese and nothing resembling a plan. Danielle listened while she cooked, not looking at him the whole time, which somehow made it easier for him to keep talking. When he finished, she set a plate in front of him. Chicken, rice, greens, a piece of cornbread, and said simply, "Eat this. Then we're starting lessons." Lessons. Cooking lessons, Ji-hoon. I'm not letting you live next door to me eating cardboard for the next however many years while my food smells amazing through the wall. That's a crime against my kitchen's reputation. He looked down at the plate. It was, without question, the best thing he had eaten since he'd left Korea. "Okay," he said. "Teach me." He did not know yet that this sentence would end up meaning far more than either of them intended. The first lesson happened that Saturday. Danielle showed up at his door with a grocery bag of vegetables, a cutting board she brought from her own apartment because she didn't trust his, and an attitude that suggested she was approaching a difficult but not impossible renovation project. "Okay," she said, laying it all out on his counter. "Rule 1. We start with knife skills, because you're going to hurt yourself otherwise. And I refuse to be the reason my hot neighbor loses a finger." Ji-hoon paused at hot neighbor but said nothing, filing it away carefully, the way he filed away everything she said about him. She handed him a knife and an onion. "Show me how you'd normally hold this." He gripped the knife the way you'd grip a hammer. Full fist, white-knuckled, aggressive. Danielle winced. "Okay, no. Absolutely not. Put it down before you become a headline." She stepped behind him, closer than either of them had been before, and reached around to adjust his grip, her hand over his, guiding his fingers into a loose pinch on the blade, curling his other hand's fingertips under like a claw around the onion. "Like this," she said, her voice quieter than before. "Pinch the blade, not the handle. Control comes from here." She tapped just above his knuckles. "And curl your fingers under so you don't." He stopped. Neither of them moved. Her hand was still over his. His breath had gone somewhere shallow and careful. The kitchen, his empty, silent, unlived-in kitchen, suddenly felt very small and very warm, and neither of them said anything for 3 full seconds, which is a very long time to stand perfectly still with your hand over someone else's hand. "So you don't cut yourself," Danielle finished, a beat too late, and pulled her hand back like the counter had gotten hot. "Right," Ji-hoon said, staring very intensely at the onion. "Right," she agreed, staring very intensely at absolutely nothing. They did not discuss what had just happened. They chopped the onion instead, badly, unevenly, in careful silence, both of them thinking about the same 3 seconds and neither one brave enough to say so. Lesson 2 went worse in the way that mattered and better in the way that counted. He burned the chicken again. Differently this time. Not incinerated, just badly, sadly overcooked, dry as paper. And Danielle took one bite and made a face she tried and failed to hide. "It's fine," Ji-hoon said, watching her expression like it was a stock ticker. "It's chicken jerky," Danielle said. "You made chicken jerky by accident. That's actually impressive in its own way. I followed your instructions." "You followed my instructions the way you'd follow a manual for a machine you didn't trust. Carefully, and also completely wrong." She stood, took the pan from him without asking, and started again herself, narrating every step out loud this time, slower. "Watch the color. Watch it, don't just set a timer and walk away like you're compiling code." "I compile code very well. I believe you. This is not code." He watched her hands instead of the pan, the easy, unthinking confidence in them, the way she moved through a kitchen like it was a room she'd grown up in, which in a way she had. He thought about his mother's hands, doing the same easy, unthinking things back in Seoul, and felt a small, unexpected ache of homesickness that had nothing to do with Korea and everything to do with the specific comfort of someone taking care of you without making it a production. "You're staring," Danielle said, not looking up. "I am learning. You're staring at me, not the chicken. The chicken is not as interesting." She laughed, caught off guard, and nearly dropped the spatula. "Okay, fair. But eyes on the pan, Ji-hoon, or we're doing this again next week." By lesson 3, something had shifted between them, the way weather shifts, gradually and then all at once. They texted between lessons now. Small things, nothing important on the surface and everything important underneath. "Danielle, What are you doing tonight, Ji-hoon? Nothing. Danielle, good. Buy garlic. He smiled at his phone in a way that would have embarrassed him if anyone from his old office in Seoul had seen it. He bought the garlic. He also bought, without being asked, a small bag of the specific rice she liked, because he'd noticed the brand on her counter and remembered it, the way he remembered everything about her without meaning to. Lesson 3 was fried rice. Should have been simple. Danielle said so herself multiple times, with the confidence of someone who had made fried rice roughly 4,000 times in her life. But Ji-hoon approached it the way he approached everything, meticulously, nervously, like the rice might report him to a manager if he got it wrong. You're overthinking it, Danielle said, leaning against the counter, watching him work with real attention now instead of correcting every move. I don't want to burn it. You're not going to burn rice that's already cooked. You're just heating it up with stuff in it. Relax your shoulders. You look like you're defusing a bomb. He exhaled slowly, rolled his shoulders and kept going. Egg, garlic, the rice, a splash of soy sauce, green onion at the end because she told him to add it last for color and crunch. He plated it himself without her help, and stood back to look at it the way a man looks at something he built with his own 2 hands after being certain, for weeks, that his hands were only good for keyboards. Look like food. Real food. Food someone else might actually want to eat. Well, Danielle said, arms crossed, fighting a smile. Ji-hoon took a bite. Was good. Not restaurant good. Not his mother's cooking good. But good. Genuinely, surprisingly, undeniably good. And something in his chest swelled up so fast and so unexpectedly that he had to look down at the plate instead of at her, afraid of what his face might be doing. I did it, he said quietly. You did it, Danielle agreed, and there was something warm and unguarded in her voice, something that sounded almost proud, almost like she'd built it with him instead of just standing there watching. He took a photo of the plate, badly lit, slightly blurry, absolutely nothing like the polished shots Danielle took for a living, and sent it to his mother in Korea, because some part of him needed her to see this, needed someone from his old life to witness the small, strange miracle of him making something with his own hands that wasn't broken. His mother replied almost instantly. Mom! Wow, did you really make this? Mom, did Danielle cook it? Ji-hoon stared at the message for a long moment, phone frozen in his hand, a strange cold-hot feeling crawling up the back of his neck. He had never mentioned Danielle to his mother. Not once. Not her name, not the fire alarm, not the lessons, not the fact that his neighbor's laugh had somehow become the background music of his entire week. What? Danielle asked, noticing his face. You look like you saw a ghost. My mother, Ji-hoon said slowly, asked if you cooked it. Danielle blinked. Wait. You told your mom about me? No, he said, still staring at the phone like it might explain itself. I never told her about you. I don't understand how she knows. Danielle burst out laughing, doubling over the counter, delighted in a way that made the whole kitchen feel brighter. Mothers just know, Ji-hoon. That's the scariest superpower on earth. You didn't have to tell her. She could probably hear it in your texts. The rhythm changed or something. That is not scientifically possible. Neither is instinctively knowing your son is cooking because a woman taught him, Danielle said, still grinning. And yet, here we are. Ji-hoon looked at his phone, then at Danielle, then back at his phone, and for the first time allowed himself to sit with a thought he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. That whatever was happening between them was no longer something either of them could pretend was just about rice. What most people didn't know about Park Ji-hoon, what even Danielle didn't fully understand yet, was that his cooking problem was never really about cooking. He had built a life, brick by brick, out of independence. He'd moved across the world alone. He'd taken the promotion nobody else in his Seoul office wanted because it meant leaving everything familiar behind. He answered his own emails at midnight because he didn't trust anyone else to get the tone right. He had learned, somewhere in his 20s, that needing things from other people came with a cost he wasn't sure he could afford. Disappointment, obligation, the terror of being let down. So he simply stopped needing. It made him excellent at his job. It made his apartment very clean and very quiet and very, very empty. No photographs on the walls because photographs meant people, and people meant attachments, and attachments meant the possibility of loss. No plants because plants required someone to remember them, and Ji-hoon had learned not to trust himself to remember anything that wasn't work. The couch had a single indentation on one cushion. His, because no one else had ever sat there long enough to leave a mark. Danielle changed that without seeming to try. Started small. She left a jar of gochugaru, Korean chili flakes, ironically enough, that she'd bought to make him a fusion dish, on his counter and simply never took it back. Then a mug, chipped slightly at the handle, that she liked better than her own set, appeared in his cabinet and stayed there. A cookbook she'd outgrown, dog-eared and stained with old sauce, showed up on his shelf. So you have something to reference when I'm not around to yell at you. Then one Tuesday, she arrived at his door holding a small potted herb plant, basil, struggling slightly in need of sun. "What is this?" Ji-hoon asked, looking at it like it might be dangerous. "Basil. For your kitchen. You need something alive in this apartment besides you, and honestly, some days I'm not sure about you either. I don't know how to take care of a plant." "You didn't know how to hold a knife 2 weeks ago," Danielle said, setting it on his windowsill without asking permission, the sun hitting it just right. "You'll figure it out. Water it when the soil's dry. Talk to it if you feel like it." "I do. You talk to your plants. Don't judge me. It works." He looked at the small green thing sitting in the window of his apartment. His clean, quiet, empty apartment, and felt something shift in his chest that he didn't have words for yet in either language. Over the following weeks, without either of them fully noticing it happening, his apartment slowly, quietly, stopped being empty. A second mug in the cabinet. A blanket that wasn't his, draped over the back of the couch because Danielle got cold easily and refused to admit it. A recipe written in her handwriting, taped to the inside of a cabinet door because he'd asked her to write it down and she'd done it right there, standing in his kitchen, tongue between her teeth in concentration. He started noticing that he thought about her constantly, not just when she was there, but in the strange, quiet hours of his workday, wondering what she was cooking, what she was photographing, whether she'd laugh at something he'd thought of saying. He realized, slowly and then completely, that he no longer just wanted her to teach him how to cook. He wanted her in his life. All of it. Not as a neighbor who occasionally corrected his knife grip, but as something closer, something permanent, something he didn't yet have the courage to name out loud. He just didn't know yet how to say any of that to a woman who could apparently make his own mother suspicious from 7,000 miles away without even trying. The trouble, or the first real sign of trouble anyway, arrived on a Thursday evening in the shape of a man named Marcus. Danielle had known Marcus since college. He was easy and loud and funny in the specific way of old friends who've long since stopped performing for each other, and when he showed up at her apartment with a six-pack and a story about his terrible new boss, Danielle laughed, the kind of full, unguarded laugh that carried easily through the thin apartment walls. Ji-hoon, next door, working late on a project he didn't actually need to work late on, heard that laugh. He told himself he wasn't listening. He was not, in fact, successfully not listening. Every time it came through the wall, bright, easy, familiar, something tightened low in his chest that he didn't recognize and didn't like. An hour later, Danielle knocked on his door, still smiling from whatever conversation she'd just left. "Hey, I brought you some of the cobbler, there's extra." She stopped, taking in his face. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing," Ji-hoon said, in the specific tone of a man for whom something was extremely wrong. "You look like you found a bug in your code you can't fix." "I am fine." "You're doing the thing where your face goes flat and your voice goes quiet, which I've learned means you are, in fact, not fine." She set the cobbler down on his counter, arms crossing. "What happened?" He didn't answer right away. He wasn't used to being asked to explain a feeling. In his old life, feelings were things you managed privately, quietly, without inconveniencing anyone else with them. But Danielle just stood there, patient, waiting, and something in her steadiness made it easier than he expected. "Who was at your apartment?" he said finally, not quite a question. Understanding dawned slowly across Danielle's face, followed almost immediately by delight. "Marcus." That's my friend from college. We've known each other 12 years. He's basically my annoying older brother. She tilted her head, studying him. Why? No reason. You're doing the thing again. I am not doing a thing. Ji-hoon. She said his name slowly, drawing it out, clearly enjoying herself now. Are you jealous? No, he said immediately, looking somewhere over her shoulder at a spot on the wall that suddenly seemed very interesting. You are jealous. I am not. You are 100% jealous of Marcus, who is gay by the way, and has been my friend since I was 19, and you're standing here looking like someone told you the ramen store closed. He finally looked at her, and something in his carefully neutral expression cracked. Just slightly, just enough. Maybe, he admitted quietly. A little. The teasing left Danielle's face all at once, replaced by something softer, more careful. She hadn't expected that admission. Not from him, not so plainly, not without a fight first. In the 2 months she'd known Ji-hoon, she'd learned he rarely said things he didn't fully mean, which meant maybe a little was, from him, something closer to a confession. Okay, she said, quieter now. Why does it matter to you who I have over? He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words with the same careful precision he brought to everything else, translating something complicated into a language that wasn't entirely his own, in more ways than one. Because, he said slowly, I do not like the idea of someone else making you laugh like that. I want it to be because of me. The kitchen went very quiet. Danielle stared at him, and for the first time since the fire alarm, since the knife lesson, since the fried rice and the mother's suspiciously accurate text message, she let herself fully consider the possibility that this, whatever this was, this slow accumulation of small domestic moments, had become something much bigger than cooking lessons for both of them. Ji-hoon, she said softly. Yes. You've been in Houston 6 weeks and you already know how to say something like that. But you can't figure out how to cook chicken without turning it into charcoal? A small, surprised laugh escaped him, breaking the tension. Some skills come easier than others. Apparently. She didn't say anything else that night about what he'd admitted, and neither did he. But something had shifted permanently between them, the way it does when two people finally say a true thing out loud and can't quite pretend afterward that they hadn't heard it. 3 weeks later, Danielle let herself into Ji-hoon's apartment the way she'd started doing, unannounced, using the code he'd given her for the door because at some point it had simply stopped feeling strange for her to be there, and stopped just short of the kitchen doorway, frozen. The smell hit her first. Sesame oil, garlic, something rich and savory and unmistakably, precisely Korean. Not the tentative, careful cooking of a beginner following instructions, but the confident, practiced smell of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She stepped into the doorway. Ji-hoon stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, moving with an ease she had never once seen from him in 2 months of lessons. No hesitation, no careful measuring, no nervous glances at her for approval. He was making something layered and complicated, several pans going at once, timing it all without a single wasted motion, the way you move through a task you've done 1,000 times. What, Danielle said slowly, is happening right now? Ji-hoon looked up, and for one unguarded second, something like panic crossed his face before he smoothed it over. I am making dinner. You're making dinner like someone who actually knows how to cook. He stopped, caught, the way you're caught when a lie finally runs out of road. Danielle walked closer, taking in the pans, the knife work on the cutting board. Clean, even, practiced cuts, nothing like the uneven chunks he'd been producing 3 weeks ago. The entire quiet confidence of him standing in a kitchen he'd once been afraid of. You lied to me, she said, and it wasn't an accusation exactly. More a slow unraveling of something she was trying to understand. I didn't lie. You told me you couldn't cook, Ji-hoon. You told me your one skill was instant ramen from a package. I have been standing in this kitchen for 2 months teaching you how to hold a knife. He set down the spatula, and for a long moment he didn't say anything, choosing his words carefully, the way he always did when something mattered. I couldn't cook, he said finally, quietly. When I met you. Danielle went still. I have always known how to make some things, he continued. My mother taught me some when I was young before I stopped paying attention because I thought I would never need it. But I did not know how to make what I am making now. I learned this after. Because of you. Because of me. How? Because I wanted to be able to make something for you, Ji-hoon said, and his voice, usually so measured, cracked slightly at the edges. Something real. Not fried rice you had to teach me twice. Something from where I am from, made well. Made because I wanted to give you something instead of always taking your time, your patience, your kitchen. He gestured at the stove, at the pans, at all of it. I have been practicing at night. After you go home. I did not want you to see until it was good enough. Danielle stood in his kitchen doorway, and something in her chest that she'd been very carefully guarding for 2 months finally, fully gave way. You've been secretly practicing Korean cooking, she said slowly. At midnight, alone, so you could eventually cook for me without me watching you fail. Yes. Ji-hoon. Yes. That might be the most romantic and insane thing anyone has ever done for me. And I once dated a man who wrote me a song. He allowed himself a small, relieved smile. Was the song good? The song was terrible. This is not terrible. She gestured at the stove. What is all this exactly? Sit, he said, some of his earlier confidence returning now that the secret was out. I will show you. He plated it properly this time. Not the slightly blurry, badly lit fried rice from weeks ago, but something composed with real care. Braised short rib, glossy and dark, rice pressed neatly to the side, a small dish of banchan he'd clearly made from scratch, everything arranged the way his mother used to arrange his childhood dinners, precise and generous at once. Danielle took a bite, and her eyes actually closed for a second. Okay, she said when she'd swallowed. You need to never tell anyone you couldn't cook, because this is genuinely one of the best things I have eaten in this state. And I photograph food for a living, so that's not nothing. You are not angry that I hid this. I'm not angry. She looked at him properly then, really looked, in the specific way people look at each other right before they stop pretending about something. I think you did something for me that no one's really done before. Not like this. Not this quietly, this patiently, without needing credit for it until it was already finished. I wanted it to mean something when I told you. It does, Danielle said softly. It really does. Neither of them moved for a moment. The rice cooker clicked off in the background, and somewhere outside a car alarm went off 2 streets over. And none of it mattered, because in that small kitchen, in that once empty apartment that now had a basil plant on the windowsill and a mug with a chipped handle in the cabinet, 2 people who had spent months circling something neither of them dared name finally, quietly, let it become undeniable. For what it's worth, Danielle said. I think I've known for a while that this wasn't just about cooking lessons. I have known too, Ji-hoon admitted. For a long time. I did not know how to say it. You just did. Eventually. In your own very dramatic, secret training montage way. He laughed, a real laugh, open and unguarded, the kind she'd been slowly coaxing out of him for 2 months without either of them noticing it happening. And something about the sound of it, in his own kitchen, in his own home that no longer felt empty, made Danielle certain of something she'd been circling for weeks. She was in love with her disaster of a neighbor. Completely, thoroughly, hopelessly. Good things in stories and in life rarely arrive without some cost attached. And theirs came 4 months later in the form of an email. Danielle had built a modest but growing following documenting food across Houston. Local spots, home cooking, the small stories behind dishes that never made it into glossy magazines. It had caught the attention of a much larger publication, one with real reach, real budget, and a real offer. An extended assignment traveling through several countries, documenting regional cuisines for a major feature series. 6 months, possibly longer. The kind of opportunity that could genuinely change the trajectory of her career. She told Ji-hoon over dinner. His dinner, cooked in his kitchen, because that had become their rhythm by then, trading off who cooked and who critiqued, and watched his face carefully while she explained it. That's incredible, he said immediately, and he meant it. She could see that he meant it. You should do this. It's 6 months, Ji-hoon. Maybe longer. Different countries. I'd be gone most of the year. I know. I don't want you to just say the supportive thing because you think it's what you're supposed to say. I am not saying the supportive thing, he said carefully. I am saying the true thing, which is also the supportive thing this time. Danielle studied him across the table, searching for the crack in his composure, the flicker of what she suspected he was actually feeling underneath the calm. She found it, eventually, in the tightness around his eyes. You're scared, she said gently. Yes, he admitted, because he had learned slowly over these months that admitting things to her cost him less than he'd once believed. I am scared. 6 months is a long time. I do not know what happens to this. He gestured between them at the kitchen, at all of it, when you are on the other side of the world. So tell me not to go. I will not do that. Why not? There was no anger in the question, just genuine curiosity testing him. Ji-hoon was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was steady in the way it only got when he'd thought something through completely. Because you taught me, he said. That food is something you make for people you love. You did not have to teach me. You did it because it is who you are, generous without needing something back immediately. If I ask you to stay because I am afraid, I am asking you to become smaller so that I feel safer. I do not want that. I want you to go and become bigger. I want you to go make something beautiful, the way you made something beautiful out of me. Danielle's eyes were wet by the time he finished, and she didn't bother hiding it. And what happens to us? She asked quietly. While I'm gone. He reached across the table and took her hand. A small gesture, but a deliberate one, from a man who 2 months ago hadn't touched anyone without flinching slightly at the closeness. I will wait, he said simply. 6 months is a long time to wait, Ji-hoon. I waited 30 years to learn how to want something like this, he said. 6 months is nothing next to that. She left 3 weeks later in early spring, with 2 suitcases and a camera bag and a departure gate that Ji-hoon insisted on driving her to, even though she told him 3 separate times it wasn't necessary. It is necessary, he said, carrying her bag despite her protests. I want to see you leave. Not just know that you left. At the gate, she turned to him one last time, and for a moment neither of them said anything, because there wasn't a clean way to summarize 6 months of missing someone in the 2 minutes before final boarding. Don't burn the apartment down while I'm gone, she said finally, half laughing, eyes bright. I have not burned anything in 4 months, Ji-hoon said. I have graduated. You'd better have. I'm going to be checking your texts for suspicious smoke-related vocabulary. I will send you photos of the food, so you know I am practicing. You'd better. She hesitated, then reached up and kissed him. Soft, brief, the first time either of them had done it in public, in daylight, without the cover of a kitchen or a quiet apartment to hide the moment in. I'll miss you. A stupid, embarrassing amount. I will miss you the same amount, Ji-hoon said. Possibly more, because I have less practice at missing people, so it will hurt in a way I do not have experience managing. She laughed through the tears that had started without her fully noticing. Only you would turn missing me into a technical problem. I am an engineer. It is how I understand things. Go home, Ji-hoon. Water the basil. I love you. It was the first time either of them had said it. It came out easily, at the worst possible moment, 30 seconds before final boarding, and neither of them had planned it that way. But it was true, and true things have a way of arriving exactly when they need to. Ji-hoon's throat tightened, and for a man usually so careful with his words, he found the next ones came without any effort at all. I love you too, he said. Go. Before you miss the flight because of me. She went. He stood at the gate long after she disappeared down the jet bridge, and then he drove home to an apartment that suddenly felt very quiet again, in a way it hadn't in months, and he understood, standing in his kitchen alone that night, exactly how much she had filled without either of them noticing. The months that followed were not dramatic. There was no villain, no manufactured crisis, no meddling family standing in the way. Just the ordinary difficult work of loving someone across a distance and choosing every day to keep doing it anyway. Danielle sent photos from every country she landed in. A market in Vietnam, a kitchen in Morocco, a tiny family-run restaurant in Portugal where the owner had cried telling her the story behind her grandmother's stew. Ji-hoon sent photos back of his own progress. A proper bibimbap, a kimchi jjigae that had taken him 4 attempts, a batch of mandu he'd made entirely from scratch and folded, badly at first and then better, late into several nights. Danielle. Okay, that mandu actually looks good. Mshuk. Ji-hoon, I have been practicing. There is a video I watch. My mother sent it. Danielle. Wait, your mom is coaching you now? Ji-hoon. She says she is very pleased that Danielle finally gave me a reason to learn something useful. Danielle. I love your mother already and I haven't even met her. They talked most nights, across wildly different time zones. Ji-hoon often awake at odd hours just to catch her during a rare quiet moment. Danielle sometimes photographing a sunrise on one continent while he was watching a sunset on another. It was not always easy. There were nights the distance felt unbearable. Nights one of them was too tired or too homesick to talk properly. Nights the 6 months ahead felt like 6 years. But underneath all of it was something steady that neither absence nor time zones could quite erode. The plain, simple fact that they had built something real in that small Houston kitchen, brick by brick, mistake by mistake, and real things, it turns out, are sturdier than people expect. Ji-hoon used the time to keep building. Not just his cooking, though that continued to improve steadily, but the apartment itself. He hung photographs, finally, of the 2 of them, printed from Danielle's own camera. He bought a proper set of plants beyond the one struggling basil, and to his own quiet surprise, kept every single one alive. He learned to cook not just for approval anymore, but because he'd discovered, somewhere in those months of practice, that he genuinely loved doing it. The specific, unhurried piece of making something with his hands for someone he cared about. He was, by the time 5 months had passed, unrecognizable from the man who had once burned chicken so badly it triggered a building-wide fire alarm. Not because he'd become someone else, but because he'd finally allowed himself to become fully who he already was. A man who needed people, who wanted a home instead of just an apartment, who had learned, slowly and without ever quite meaning to, that letting someone in didn't cost him anything at all. It gave him something instead. Danielle came home on a warm evening in late autumn, 6 months and 11 days after she'd left, and Ji-hoon insisted on picking her up from the airport, standing at arrivals with a small handwritten sign that said, simply "Welcome home, chef," which made her laugh before she even reached him, tears already gathering. "You look different," she said, pulling back from a long embrace to study his face. "Do I? You look settled, happy, like someone finally unpacked." "I did unpack," Ji-hoon said. "A great many boxes. You will see." She did see an hour later, when he unlocked the door to apartment 4B and stepped back to let her walk in first. The apartment she remembered. Clean, spare, unlived in, a couch with a single indentation on one cushion, was gone. In its place was a home. Photographs lined one wall, dozens of them, printed from her own feed and from moments Ji-hoon had quietly saved without telling her. The fried rice, the 2 of them at the airport before she left, a photo Marcus had apparently taken of them laughing in Danielle's kitchen that Ji-hoon had somehow gotten a copy of. Plants filled the windowsills, thriving, clearly cared for. 2 mugs sat in the cabinet side by side. A cookbook, hers originally, now stained with new sauce and dog-eared in new places, sat open on the counter to a recipe she recognized as one of her grandmother's, which meant he'd asked her family for it while she was gone. And on the kitchen table, an enormous meal, still warm, clearly the product of hours of careful work. Korean dishes she recognized from his photos, and something else beside it, something new. "Is that?" she started. "Jollof rice," Ji-hoon said. "I asked your mother for the recipe. She was very suspicious of my intentions until I explained." "You called my mother?" "I video called her. She made me cook it in front of her over the phone to check my technique. It took 3 attempts before she approved." Danielle stared at the table. A full spread of Korean food and her own family's jollof rice, side by side, made by a man who 6 months ago couldn't hold a knife correctly and now cooked with the ease of someone who'd been doing it his whole life. "You finally learned," she said softly. "I had a very good teacher," Ji-hoon said. She walked toward him slowly, the whole transformed apartment glowing warm around them. The plants, the photographs, the 2 mugs, the meal steaming gently on the table. 6 months of quiet, patient work made visible all at once. He took her hand when she reached him, the same way he had at that dinner table before she left, deliberate and certain. "But there's one thing you never taught me," he said. "What's that?" He smiled, the real smile, the one that had taken months for her to fully coax out of him, the one that reached his eyes now without hesitation. "How to stop loving you." Danielle laughed, and it broke apart into tears halfway through. The good kind, the kind that comes when something you've hoped for quietly, carefully, for months, finally arrives exactly the way you needed it to. She kissed him, and the meal went slightly cold on the table, and neither of them minded even a little. The Magnolia Grove apartment complex looked the same from the outside. Same brick, same tired elevator, same parking lot that flooded a little every time it rained too hard. But apartment 4B and apartment 4C had, over the past year, quietly become one life split across 2 front doors, the wall between them more a formality than a boundary. Danielle still traveled for work, though shorter trips now, and Ji-hoon had learned to manage the missing her better, mostly by staying busy in the kitchen, cooking meals he'd photograph badly and send anyway, because she said she loved the bad photos more than the professional ones. Because those are real, those are just you cooking, thinking of me. On the 1-year anniversary of the night the fire alarm first brought them together, Danielle came home to find a small dinner waiting. Not elaborate this time, just simple fried rice made carefully, the same dish from that very first successful lesson. "You're going backwards," she teased, sitting down at the table. "I am going back to the beginning," Ji-hoon corrected. "To remember where this started." On the counter beside the stove sat the basil plant, thriving now, tall and green and thoroughly alive, alongside 3 others that had joined it over the year. On the wall, the photographs had multiplied. In the cabinet, there were 3 mugs now instead of 2, because Marcus had started leaving his own things behind on his visits, having long since become as much a fixture in Ji-hoon's life as he'd always been in Danielle's. They ate the fried rice together at the small kitchen table, in an apartment that had once been silent and empty and was now, unmistakably, full of plants that had been remembered, of photographs that had been chosen, of 2 people who had learned, slowly and without a villain or a family scandal or any danger at all, the oldest and simplest truth there is. That love, more often than not, doesn't arrive with fireworks or danger. Sometimes it arrives with smoke pouring out from under a door, a woman in socks laughing at a burnt chicken breast, and a man who had everything except someone to cook for. Until, quietly, one dish at a time, he didn't have to wonder anymore.